Thank you so much for joining Optimizely today for the second in our Spring into Action webinar series, which is called Test Ideas to Optimize Every Step of the B2B Funnel. This one is presented by Arun Sivashankaran from FunnelEnvy, one of our esteemed Optimizely agency partners. My name is Kara Harshman. I'm a content strategist here at Optimizely in San Francisco, and I'm so excited to be your host for this Spring into Action webinar series, where we're trying to bring you really actionable processes and test ideas to become amazing optimizers. So we are going to get started in just a minute with Arun's presentation. And before we get started, I want to say if you want to tweet or share, please do so. You can tweet to me at Kara Harshman or tweet to Optimizely at Optimizely or Arun himself at A Sivash. And he has his handle on his slides, so don't worry, you'll be able to find them. And for all you people who always ask this question, this webinar will be recorded and we will be sending out the slides and the recording as soon as possible. We will leave time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so please use your GoToWebinar question box or chat box if you want to say hi to me or Arun, you can do that, and we will get to your questions live at the end. So without further ado, I will send it over to Arun to tell you all about awesome test ideas to optimize every step of the B2B funnel. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kara. And I also want to thank everyone at Optimizely for hosting today, for inviting me to speak, and for all of you listening, thanks for taking time out of your day to talk about B2B test ideas. First, I wanted to start by just introducing myself as well as my company, FunnelEnvy. We like to consider ourselves engineers with a marketing problem. What that practically means is, we're focused on marketing, conversion optimization, and personalization, but we do so with a very technical approach. It's about data and code to solve those problems. We have a software platform. It helps account-based marketers, use a lot of data to personalize the user experience through platforms like Optimizely. And we also have conversion optimization and personalization services. We work with a lot of enterprise clients to improve their conversion rates. And we specifically work with a lot of B2B clients, which is why we're here today, B2B customers and clients, and have a unique perspective, I think, on the challenges and opportunities in B2B. So let's dig into some of those opportunities and some of the goals that you might have as marketers in your optimization and testing program. So certainly you might be interested in improving some of those key conversion rates, whether that's leads, trials, registrations, the main conversion activities on your site. More broadly, you might be interested in improving engagement, and that engagement could be measured at a lead or an account level. The velocity through that funnel, we'll also refer to the funnel as the customer journey as we go through today. But you might be interested in using testing to improve the funnel velocity, increase the funnel velocity, and the specific conversion rates between stages of that customer journey. Certainly, if you're a subscription business, a B2B subscription business, as many of you are, you're acutely aware of your customer lifetime value, your LTV, and you might be trying to reduce churn through testing and through some of your test ideas. If you have existing customers, one potential opportunity in testing is to renew and expand those existing accounts. And again, if they're existing customers, you might be trying to drive referrals. And these are just some of the opportunities for B2B and testing. There are, however, very real challenges in B2B when it comes to testing and optimization. As opposed to your counterparts in B2C, B2B often has less of an on-site direct response component. That's often driven by a longer customer journey. There are other channels involved, and especially when you get into the enterprise, you're dealing with multiple decision makers. So it's not about that single person on the site making a quick decision. It's long journey, multiple channels, multiple decision makers. As a consequence of those multiple channels, attribution is always a challenge in B2B. Certainly attribution to get to a lead, but even beyond that, if you're looking at engagement and subsequent user activity. You're dealing with a more complex marketing stack, marketing automation platforms, CRM. You're often having to integrate into that stack to do the attribution, to get the data, and even to improve that user experience. And I think finally, the most tactical challenge that we hear about frequently all the time in B2B is that there's just lower traffic. Again, compared to your B2C counterparts, it's just harder to get to statistical significance on your tests, and you're more limited in what you can do from that perspective. So to understand how we might test, I think it's really important to understand the characteristics of your market to inform that strategy and possible test ideas. If you think about B2C and B2C businesses where they do a lot of optimization and testing, you typically have a pretty wide customer distribution. So lots of customers, therefore lots of traffic, and the economic value of your market is kind of spread evenly across that wide customer base. That's why you can do a lot of testing in B2C. If you're a business selling to small or medium-sized businesses, you could have market characteristics that look a lot like B2C. So again, wide customer distribution, lots of customers, and more traffic. As you move towards enterprise, however, and start selling more to the enterprise, often that customer distribution is much narrower. So a few target accounts or types of target accounts drive the bulk of the business. And the economic impact of those, or potential economic impact of any one of those target accounts is much higher. In that example, you can go much deeper in terms of your investment into those target accounts, drive deeper engagement because the ROI is there and justifies that deeper investment. And this is where strategies and tactics like account-based marketing are becoming increasingly popular in this context. So in addition to understanding those market characteristics, I think it's really also important to understand your customer journey, your funnel, because that's going to inform your high potential test strategy and test ideas. So today we're going to talk through three examples of customer journeys. One is the short, high velocity, low touch customer journey, very characteristic of a business selling to small businesses. Then we're going to kind of expand that a little bit and look at a customer journey which is longer, has multiple stages in it. It can also involve sales. And finally, we're going to bring in account-based marketing and some account-based characteristics and use those to drive some test ideas. So let's start with that short, high velocity, low touch customer journey and look at some test opportunities there. So this is a bit of a contrived example, but a simple example, and certainly your customer journey is going to evolve as you learn more about your customers and evolve as a business. But in this example, you've got a website, someone comes to the website, they engage, you encourage them to sign up for a trial or registration, and then they engage beyond that and become a customer. So the goals in the context of this kind of funnel might be to get that initial engagement, to get them to sign up, whether that's a lead, a free trial, registration, depending on the nature of your business. And then subsequent to that, after they do make that initial commitment, improve the user experience, reduce the churn risk, turn them into an active, engaged customer. So many of you certainly have landing pages, and you're driving paid traffic to these landing pages. That's certainly an excellent place to start testing, especially if you're concerned about the conversion rates on those landing pages. Since you are driving paid traffic to them, there's potentially a lot of value in focusing there and improving conversion rates. At FunnelEnvy, we have done a lot of landing page testing. This is an example of one that we did years ago. And you can see here through some relatively simple changes, changing the headline and subheadline, moving the call to action above the fold, as well as improving the design of it, taking some of the distractions out of the page, we were able to get some really significant improvements in our lead conversion rate. So when we're thinking about landing page optimization and landing page testing, I always like to refer to the elements of what makes an effective landing page. And one of those sources is Unbounce's really, really great post about the anatomy of an effective landing page. So I'm going to use this as a reference point when we talk through test ideas. Certainly, when one great opportunity for testing and test ideas is looking at the headline on your landing page and ensuring that you have a concise headline that clearly expresses the unique selling proposition of your solution and in language that resonates with the customer. I'd say in addition to that, if you are driving paid traffic to it, ensuring that the copy of the headline mirrors the ad impression, whether that's a search ad or a display ad, The higher degree of affinity you can bring between the headline copy and the ad impression, the higher in theory your conversion rates will be. And that's one of the first things that we look at when we're looking at landing pages and finding low-hanging fruit to improve conversion rates. The website copy, or the landing page copy, is also a great opportunity for test ideas. If you find that it's very feature-heavy, you might test reframing that copy to empathize with the customer's pain points, articulate the benefits of the solution, rather than going through a laundry list of features. Social proof. So these are the testimonials, the logos, those elements that you have in there that bridge the trust gap for the visitor between landing on the page and making a commitment, clicking on that call to action. Certainly, if you don't have that kind of social proof or reinforcement, that's something you may want to introduce as testing. But if you do have them, you might want to take a second look at some of the testimonials and logos that you have on the site and make sure they do reflect the nature of the visitor landing on that page. And then, putting a single prominent call to action above the fold, it seems like a simple idea, but it's often overlooked. As you saw in the previous example, bringing that call to action above the fold in an area of high importance and that gets a lot of traffic can be very effective. And sort of in conjunction with that, the hero shot. Typically, you've got about 5 seconds before the visitor decides to continue to engage or hit the back button. The hero shot is that image or video that compels them to continue to engage with the page. If you find that yours, doesn't really do that, you might want to try something else that draws the user in and encourages to keep reading. On those landing pages or on other places of the site, you probably have forms and lead forms. And as many of you know, the more fields you have in those forms, that can have a negative effect on conversion rates. In this pretty famous post years ago by John Miller, founder of Marketo, he actually, ran the numbers and published a blog post about the effect of reducing his form fields on his lead form from 9 down to 7 to 5. And as you can see, it had a pretty dramatic impact on his conversion rates and a corresponding effect on reducing his cost per lead. Now, if you one test idea might be to go through some of your forms and make sure that if you have any extraneous fields in there, things that aren't being used, pulling those out is a pretty quick way to see if you can improve those conversion rates on those forms. That being said, reducing or eliminating form fields doesn't happen in a vacuum. If you do have a sales team and an SDR team that's using that data to qualify, you might make them angry because removing some of that industry data or company data can make it that much harder for them to qualify leads. Certainly, there are solutions to that. You can partner with a data provider that'll actually populate hidden fields in those forms based on firmographic data. Or you can enrich that lead data directly in your marketing automation solution, for example. This is an example of a company called Clearbit. They do this very well. There are other providers out there. They'll actually populate the lead and firmographic data based on the email address. These techniques have a sort of secondary benefit as well, in that you potentially are getting higher quality data because when the user enters it on the form, you often run into false or just bad data coming in due to user input. SEO content, your blog content, is another great opportunity for test ideas and improving conversion rates. So these can be all over the place. In fact, as I was going through the FunnelEnvy site, I saw a great example of what not to do. So as you can see here, the blog post is clearly geared towards e-commerce sites. People reading this, engaging with this content, presumably run e-commerce sites or are interested in e-commerce. As you scroll down to the bottom of the page, the good news is we do have call to actions below the blog post. Unfortunately, there are 2 calls to actions, which probably have a negative impact on conversions, and one of them is for our B2B personalization product. That's probably not something that's going to resonate with someone that has engaged with this content. So certainly opportunities here to improve that, reduce the number of CTAs, and make this call to action more relevant. So when you do look at your SEO content, with visitors that are engaging with that content, they are engaged with that content. And if you do have content that speaks to different aspects of your solution or different industries, there's some self-segmentation happening there. And you can use that to your advantage when you're thinking about testing and conversions. Certainly, if you don't have a single call to action or a call to action at all, below some of that blog content that takes that user to the next step, you might want to test putting that in there. And like we saw in the previous example, try to make that as relevant as possible to the content that the user has just read. Certainly, other recommendation that I would make here is think about what the next logical step in that journey is. Someone's just read that public content. Where would you take them next? In the previous example, it was learn more about our services. But we could have tested putting a more in-depth white paper, gated content there to move the user to the next step, which might have a higher conversion, and then nurture them from there. And so you might want to test different types of calls to actions with your blog content. Pricing pages. In B2B, many of you probably have pricing pages, and this is an area of the site and pricing pages where I would spend a lot of time doing iterative testing. By definition, when users have engaged with your content, they've learned about the solution, and they arrive at the pricing page, often they have a high intent to purchase, or at least consider that purchase decision. So this is high value traffic. I think the important thing about pricing pages is that they be clear in terms of giving the user the information to be able to make that pricing decision, and also not introduce additional points of friction. So here's an example of two pricing pages, both from the same company. The older example is the one on the left. It uses kind of a non-traditional vertical layout. There are lots of options, lots of copy. It's a little bit confusing, hard for the user to make a decision. And the cleaned up one is the one on the right. It uses a much more standard layout. The differentiation between tiers is much clearer, and they make a clear suggestion as which one they recommend to be selected. So I don't have the data on this, but I suspect the cleaned up one on the right converts much better. The specific pricing tiers on that pricing page is often an area of focus for testing, and something that you might want to spend a lot of time on. I'm going to use two of the classic B2B examples for reference points here. The first one is from HubSpot. The second one from Salesforce. They do a great job at high converting pricing tiers. So one of the first things you might want to look at for test ideas is the design of your pricing tiers. And again, focusing on the clarity and simplicity of that. Does the design convey the most critical aspects of the information about those pricing tiers in order for the user to make a purchase decision? Are the calls to action clear, differentiated enough that they stand out? So if you don't find that if you're looking for test ideas and you don't think your design hits the mark there, you might want to test alternative designs. Aligning your pricing with buyer persona. So the idea here is to articulate your pricing tiers in a way that resonates with the customer's perception of their own business. For example, professional and enterprise are both terms that both HubSpot and Salesforce use. And it's very, very infrequently that people arrive on either of these pricing pages and get confused between which one they have to pick. The way that the pricing tiers are articulated matches how the user perceives their business. And that helps the user not get stuck trying to choose between options. I'd say in conjunction with that, or in addition to that, we and many other people recommend scaling your pricing tiers through a single core value metric. And this is a single metric that the user understands, that the customer understands, reflects increased value that they're getting from your platform as it scales. To take the HubSpot example, the pricing is based on number of contacts, and the user kind of intuitively understands that as they have more context in HubSpot, the pricing increases because the value to them increases as well. So if you're looking at your pricing pages and want to improve conversions there, and find that your pricing tiers aren't necessarily consistent with the buyer persona, or you're not clearly articulating a single core value metric, you may want to test reframing some of that pricing, re-articulating it, and comparing that to your current baseline. The calls to action. I think it's really important on these pricing pages to set clear expectations on the calls to action as to what happens when the user clicks that button. So in the HubSpot example, somewhat non-traditionally, they use two calls to action, but in this case, they are differentiated both in design as well as the expectations. One is about trying it, engaging in the free trial. One is about is signing up. Salesforce is very clear that when you click on that button, you start the free trial process. So if the If the expectation isn't clear in your call to action language, that might be something that you want to test. Now, even if you get all of this right, you're going to run into times where the user is still stuck, staring at the pricing page and can't make a decision. And if you do have that happening, that's really high value traffic that you don't necessarily want to lose. So if it's worth it to you, you might want to test offering help, intervening with a human. And there are a couple ways you can go about this. Salesforce, after a couple of seconds or minutes, pops up a modal window offering to put you in front of a live agent. If you have chat already on the site, certainly you can pop that chat window when the user is stuck. Offer to intervene, give them whatever information they need to potentially get that conversion, get them across the line. Once they have made that sort of initial commitment and signed up for, say, the free trial, it is really important to be able to get them value as quickly as possible. What you're trying to do is increase that likelihood of user success in their first impression or at first adoption. That could have a dramatic impact in improving engagements, reducing that churn risk, and avoiding the ghost town effect, where I'm dropped into this new platform but there's nothing there. I don't see any value out of it. Now, some of the test ideas here are often higher investment in terms of the effort to pull them off, but because of that potential impact on LTV, they can have really significant returns to your business. So depending on the nature of your platform, if you have a solution that requires a bit of explanation, you might want to test something like the Tor Approach that Slack does in this example, where they show you a few screens with some more copy, explain how the solution works, and explain how you get value from it. In a situation where you have very discrete tasks that the user can do quickly to engage with a platform, see how it works, and get value, you might want to try the sort of thing where Basecamp does in this example, where they encourage you to jump right in, create a discussion item or a to-do list. Again, these are quick, easy tasks that the user can accomplish in a few minutes, and they start building familiarity and they see some value immediately. Now, within your user interface, you might have specific elements that are really important to understanding the user interface and being able to engage with it in the long term. If you find yourself in that position, you may want to test something like what Slack does, again, with Joyride, what's being called Joyride, where they highlight those user interface elements when the user first comes into the solution, and then you click on them. It gives you some explanatory text. Again, it's bridging that gap to help them understand the interface better. And finally, if you need a good bit of user input for them to start seeing the value out of it, rather than dumping them into the unfamiliar interface and having them have to navigate around to figure out where to put that information in, the classic wizard approach basically simplifies that data entry, gives you a few screens, a pared down set of forms, get that data in quickly so that they can start, again, seeing value out of the solution more quickly. So if you have a data input component before they start getting anything out of the platform, you may want to test a wizard. All right, let's expand that customer journey to include more steps, multiple stages, and in this case, we're going to bring in sales into the equation. So again, in this example here, we've got something like a website visitor downloads some content, maybe then attends an event like this webinar that we're all at, has a conversation with sales, and signs up for an account, activates, becomes an engaged customer. Certainly, more steps, longer customer journey, multiple parties involved, more complexity. So in this kind of scenario, it can be very effective to target your testing by the depth of engagement within that journey, the stage that the customer is at. This can have several possible goals. One can certainly be improve engagement, like we saw in the shorter customer journey, the lead conversions. But really, it's about moving the customer to the next logical step in the customer journey and the conversion range between stages in that customer journey. And, if you can target existing customers, you can also think about things like, renewals, expansions, advocacy, or even referrals. So to be able to target by the particular stage in the customer journey, obviously you're going to introduce a data dependency into the equation. And that's bringing data to your optimization platform to be able to test and isolate, by the user stage in that customer journey. That data can be behavioral. It can be the activity that they do on the site. If you have a SaaS platform, you can integrate in your actual application data after the user has authenticated. And then marketing automation of CRM data, integrating that in, using that in your A/B testing can be very effective to target by the depth of engagement. So to go through some examples here, this is from a case study published by HubSpot. In this example, this site has, what I sometimes call multiple personality disorder. The content that's tailored to, in this case, multiple personas within the organization, from the CEO on down to the sales rep. And so, the first time that the user arrives at this page, in this case, the site actually asks you, what role are you in? And then in that visit, but also when you close the browser and come back to the site, the entire user experience is personalized based on that role that you previously chose. And certainly, if you have this situation where you have content that's based on multiple industries or multiple personas, just asking the question, remembering the user behavior, and then personalizing user experience, testing that against the baseline experience, you might be more effective in driving increased engagement. Behavioral is one way to go about it. There's certainly other ways to move the customers through the journey. You might have that data in your marketing automation solution. So again, in a case study by HubSpot, in this case, when the user first came to the site, they were presented with an opportunity to download an ebook. That ebook was gated content, sitting behind a lead form. User filled out that lead form, become a lead in HubSpot. They would end up on that lead would end up on a list, and that list was then integrated back into the user experience. So subsequently, when they would come back to the site, if they were on that list, they wouldn't see the ebook offer again because it wouldn't make any sense. Instead, they'd see the next step in that customer journey, which is attending a webinar in this case. So if you do have marketing automation data that, and very often it does capture the depth of engagement of any particular lead, integrating that into the user experience and your optimization platform could make for some very interesting A/B tests. And getting back to putting the user in front of a human, if you know that they're a customer or if you know they have a high propensity to convert based on the depth of engagement, using chat and testing chat, but much more contextually aware in this case, could be very effective in driving whatever conversion to the next step of the journey. So if they're a very engaged prospect and they have questions, putting a chat window in front of them, if you can target based on that engagement, can be effective to get them across the line. Similarly, if they're an existing customer and you can understand that they might have questions or challenges, testing, putting that chat window in them to alleviate those concerns, could be very effective. So referrals can also be an important part of B2B marketing. And if you've decided that referrals are an integral component of your marketing strategy, there's a lot of testing you can do around both referrals and advocacy. When it comes to referrals, certainly you'll want to be able to target if they are an existing customer or not. But oftentimes it helps to target customers, for referrals once they've had a positive experience with your solution. So there are several ways you could go about doing that, assuming you can target those customers. It can be as simple, learn about our referral program, as you see in the Booker example, or you can get, more complex with it. Yes, where in this example, we'll actually fill out the email for you, make it really easy for you to invite someone to their platform. Okay, let's get even more complex now and talk about account-based marketing and how that might fit into the customer journey as well as testing opportunities. So here we're dealing with a long customer journey as well. Lots of steps, lots of stages, multiple parties involved. But in addition to the depth of that journey, we're also introducing some breadth. And that breadth is in the form of account-based dimensions. So those could be specific target companies. Those could be target industries, or those could be other firmographic characteristics that reflect your target companies, like company size, revenue thresholds, number of employees, that kind of thing. So for any one of these dimensions, the customer journey itself could be different. For example, you might not put a small business in front of a salesperson. You might want to take them directly to account sign up. And within the particular steps within the journey, you might differentiate that content based on the target company or target industry. So, again, just more complexity in this journey. we refer back to some of the market characteristics that we talked about earlier, I think the test ideas and testing opportunities that we're going to talk about that leverage account-based marketing really skew towards those of you that are selling to the enterprise. Larger deal sizes, fewer customers, larger economic value per deal. You can afford to invest more and try to get deeper engagement with those target accounts. So to quickly review or introduce account-based marketing, if you think of typical demand generation, traditional demand generation as a wide top of the funnel, driving lots of leads into it, and then a successive series of marketing or sales qualification steps to progressively narrow that funnel and get the ideal leads or customers out of the bottom. Account-based marketing is often presented as an inversion of that funnel. Again, in this case, you have a much more finite universe of customers that are higher value to the business. So you start by identifying those based on the named accounts or characteristics of those named accounts. And then through a coordinated marketing and sales approach, seek to expand the overall depth of engagement of your business into those accounts. So how that translates into on-site activity and the sort of testing and personalization you might do is what we call account-based personalization. So here what we're trying to do is create really differentiated, highly relevant website experiences based on those target account or firmographic characteristics. And the nature of those differentiated experiences are going to reflect the value of the account as well as the level of engagement that account has with your business. As I mentioned before, account-based marketing is a tightly coupled sales and marketing function. The accounts that you're going after, an example in marketing and in these personalized experiences, are the same ones that sales is going after. And finally, as I mentioned, in some of the previous examples where you're looking to improve conversion rates of your leads, drive a lot more leads. In this case, in an account-based personalization context, you might be thinking about actually fewer leads, but higher quality engagements from really high-value target accounts. So this expands our data dependency to get to account-based personalization. Certainly the engagement depth is an important component to it, but we're now adding in account-based dimensions and bringing those to the optimization platform. Those could be firmographic characteristics, the specific company, industry, number of employees, revenue. You could also look at contact information, job function, or intent. If you can bring those account dimensions or data about the engagement depth in real time to your optimization platform, you can start testing highly personalized experiences with that data. So this is very common in B2B, where you have multiple content paths based on the vertical that your solution has an offering in. So a user coming from any particular vertical in this case has to wade through this sort of or even more complex interface to find the content that's relevant for them, and that does introduce friction into their experience. What would be ideal is if you knew the industry of the visitor, if you could present them as soon as possible in their experience the information that was really tailored to their industry or vertical. So to give an actual example of a test that we ran, personalizing some of the landing pages based on industry. With a customer of ours, we took what was a pretty generic logo bar. Many of you have this on your landing pages, and looked at testing that based on the industry of the user. The idea here was to present more relevant logos that would resonate with the user based on the industry that they were in. And this isn't just limited to the logo bar. You could also test the headline, testimonials, and even the benefits of the solution that you're offering. Another test that we ran was based on gated content. So for a customer of ours, there was a default content offer, in this case an ebook that they offered, and they used that to then nurture and identify leads. So the default content offer, we took that and tested that against some industry-specific variations, where ebooks were created based on the industry, and we also changed the imagery as well as the copy to reflect the industry. And in cases where we couldn't identify the user within a particular industry or within the particular target industries, we also added in some location-specific offers. And testing that against the baseline had, a really dramatic effect, over 200% in terms of conversions. Again, introducing more personalized, relevant content based on account-based characteristics. So ultimately, if you do actually have named accounts and you can identify them when they come to the site, you can go really deep in terms of the personalized experience and test that. By default, when you come to the Optimizely.com homepage, there's some degree of personalization happening here. Clearly in the middle of the night when I was putting this deck together, you can see that the headline copy reflects that. But in this example, we worked actually closely with Optimizely to build out a campaign on their homepage that personalizes the entire experience based on the target account you're coming from. You see a couple of examples here, one of Nike, one of Sony, where the entire page was changed through the Optimizely personalization platform and is now being tested against that baseline version. And this personalization actually goes pretty deep. In addition to the hero section, which is the imagery and the headline, there are particular modules within the homepage that are personalized based on the user's behavior, based on the location of the account. Similar to the example you saw before, some of those testimonials and logos also reflect the industry of the target account to be more relevant. And the calls to action, the content that's being put in front of that particular visitor or the events that are being put in front of them also reflect the target account and are personalized to be more relevant to that target account. So, if you do have this capability, if you do have named accounts, and you can identify them on the site, creating a deep personalized experience can really improve the depth of that engagement, and that is something that you can test and measure. So I want to summarize some of the main points through the presentation here. The test ideas ideally should be focused on improving the customer experience, increasing engagement, as well as the velocity through that customer journey of funnel through testing. Certainly, having a strong understanding of your market characteristics as well as the customer journey itself is really important to understand, to identify and understand relevant, testing and personalization opportunities. The more context you can bring to bear, if you remember the data dependencies, the more context that you can bring to bear about that visitor can drive much more relevant testing ideas. And in one example, if you can target by engagement depth, there are lots of ways that you can accelerate the velocity through the journey. And in addition to that, if you can bring account-based marketing to bear, account-based personalization to bear, you can deliver much higher quality engagement with those high-value target accounts. So some takeaways, things that you can start doing now. Certainly mapping out that customer journey that you have. You maybe have already done this, but if you haven't, really identifying some of the stages and dimensions of your customer journey that you are seeking to improve through testing. And those that customer journey is informed in a quantitative manner through KPIs and metrics. So identifying and understanding those KPIs and metrics, and then aligning your test ideas to those KPIs and metrics is an important part of strong test ideas. And then to actually find test ideas, we always recommend evidence, finding friction in that journey through both quantitative evidence in the form of analytics and qualitative evidence, customer surveys, session recordings, heat maps, finding the places where users are getting stuck through the customer journey, and then coming up with opportunities and ideas to improve them through testing. Once you've identified those specific areas of the customer journey that could be improved through testing, figuring out how you're going to target those users. Because of the nature of B2B and because of the longer customer journeys, targeting is more challenging. You're going to have to define those targeting criteria to be able to find those customers in the journey, and that may require integration of some of your data sources. Then the final point here is that the ideas themselves are insufficient for an effective testing program. Ideas need to be turned into well-structured hypotheses. Well-structured hypotheses ideally have three components: the proposed change, the potential impact, and the evidence underlying that hypothesis. And then, our framework of prioritization at FunnelEnvy always balances that potential impact with the level of effort to actually execute a test. So with that, I wanted to thank all of you for listening, and ready to take some questions.
Amazing. Well, there's been so many people asking lots of engaging questions. They've been waiting patiently to have their questions answered. Thank you, everyone, for such engagement. It's Kara here again, and I'm going to facilitate some of these questions. So stay with us if you have more time. There's a lot of good stuff to come. So the first question is from Jan, and this goes back to the account-based marketing. And she wants to know, can you identify named accounts if they're not logged into your platform?
Yes, good question. You can, and there are several solutions. One of which is ours, but there's several solutions out there in the market that can do that at various degrees of quality. And the underlying technologies there are things like reverse IP lookups or partnering with cookie providers to to identify an anonymous traffic what accounts they're coming from. The other point there is that it also works better in certain industries and certain segments based on some of those technologies. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. So at Optimizely, we use demand base to identify our target accounts. Okay, question from Tom. How would you best explain hypothesis testing versus usability testing?
So hypothesis testing, the way we conceive of test hypotheses and in fact structure, our whole testing program is around, core hypotheses. So identifying challenges in the usability, identifying evidence in the data, and then proposing a hypothesis to improve the user experience and affect one of the KPIs or metrics. Usability testing, I think, precedes that activity, where you're looking for it's a way to look for the evidence and look for friction in the user experience.
And just as a reminder, these slides and PowerPoint will be made available as soon as possible. We'll send out the recording and the slides. Okay. This is a question from Nick. So how do you measure, quote unquote, the fold? Because with the high number of screen resolutions, responsive websites, etc., how do you know where the fold is?
It's a very good question. So a lot of the heat mapping tools will give you scroll depth and will allow you to segment scroll depth by device type. That's pretty good data, because at some point you'll see a pretty dramatic drop off where the user stops. You can also just look at your site in different devices and understand where the 80% of the fold occurs. It's not an exact science by any means. Even on a desktop browser, there are different sizes of viewports at play too. But I think the point there is that higher up in the page, where 80 to 90% of the visitors are going to see the content, even if they don't scroll down, is of higher value in terms of where you place things on the landing page.
Right, and you can look at your heat map to see where people are spending most time on the page, and you can add another CTA to that area.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a similar question from Libby, that you mentioned to add a single CTA above the fold, but she's wondering about a double-sided marketplace where you have B2B and B2C that we're targeting. So can you do a dual CTA, like employers click here and employees click here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the theory is always that the single primary call to action will convert better. So, of course, that's not always that easy to pull off in practice. So a couple of recommendations are: one, the first is if you can segment that traffic, if you can drive one side of the market to one landing page and or one experience, and another side of the market to another experience, because you've segmented that traffic, you can make the experience much more relevant for each side of your marketplace. Certainly, if you can't do that, I'd recommend testing, making one of them primary and making one of them secondary. So, for example, making one of them a prominent button, the second one a link that sits next to the button that says, "Oh, you're an employer. Click here to go through that experience." So there are a couple ways you can approach that.
Good idea. Yeah, if you can personalize based on who you know they are, then you don't need to worry about the multiple CTAs.
And frequently, to add to that, depending on your business, one side of that two-sided marketplace will drives the business, and one kind of induces demand for the other one. If you find you have that characteristic, you want to cater to the side that induces demand.
Good point. So from Tracy, this is the doozy B2B question. Traffic. Low volume is often an issue with A/B testing for B2B, right? And it seems that with account-based marketing and targeting these specific experiences to individuals, you may even amplify the problem. How do you overcome this lack of data, lack of traffic to get statistical significance?
Very, very good question. I was waiting for this one. So at the risk of saying this on an Optimizely webinar, if you're talking about account-based marketing, statistical significance may not be the thing that you're after. You're going to have to make this decision based on your context and your business and your marketing mix. But many times, as I mentioned, with account-based marketing, you're looking for a depth of engagement that isn't necessarily adequately captured by a conversion rate metric and a statistically significant lift. This is not a completely solved problem in the account-based marketing world. I think the folks at Engagio, for example, have some great theories around what they call a marketing qualified account, and other folks are looking at different ways to measure it. But what you're really talking about is depth of engagement. So I think first and foremost, if you can't get there on like a traditional statistical significance off of an A/B test, you've got to define for your business what's important, how you're going to measure depth of engagement, again, both in a coordinated marketing and sales way, and make a strategic decision that you're going to measure that and evaluate that against your underlying financial and revenue metrics.
Yeah, it gets to not always just the math. You can't just let the math do all the deciding. We know that there's a balance of creativity and data in all of this. And if you are just doing what converts best, you may end up with a ton of leads that know nothing about your product. So like you said earlier about the form fields, there's definitely a balance of quality, quantity, and experience.
Especially in B2B.
Mm-hmm. So Adam wants to know if we can touch on prioritizing tests, because when you have limited developer resources as well, how do you decide what you build, what you put on the wait list, etc.?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the prioritization is always really critical. As I mentioned, we have a certain framework that we use, but at the end of the day, all of the frameworks out there effectively, and in my opinion, boil down to balancing the impact of any particular test, so in as quantifiable a way as possible. So if you can say, we think based on tangible evidence, this will have a 20% lift in a KPI or revenue metric or something like that, that's a good place to be. And then really understanding the level of impact or the level of effort to test it based on those developer resources. So there are lots of good frameworks out there. Chris Goward from Wider Funnel has a very popularly adopted one called the PI framework, but they all boil down to the same principle. I think it's also important to make sure that you do have some kind of structure like that, but it also be not too rigid that it's a bureaucratic exercise, that you can move through it quickly, get tests out the door quickly, and continue to reevaluate and learn as you go through testing.
This is a really hot topic that Optimizely covers, and I'm the blog manager for Optimizely, and I can tell you that we have lots of resources and blog posts about how to prioritize your tests with worksheets and spreadsheets and examples from big businesses like Hotwire. So if you go to blog.optimizely.com and search prioritization, you'll find a lot of resources. That's another helpful resource. Yay. Okay, so from Sheila. So she wants to know that she's a small company focused on B2B enterprise and has limited marketing budget, like all of us. What are the top 2 things she should be focused on that will produce the most immediate results?
Well, this is a tough one to answer in the abstract, because you can be a small business that's, pre-product market fit, and you're in that situation, the most important thing you can do is all the non-scalable stuff, like go talk to your customer, really empathize with them, learn in depth about their problems, and then tailor your solution to that to hopefully become a much larger business. If that's not the case, and you're already there, but you're just a small business, and that's just you're a small business that is already identified product market fit, the equation could be much different. It's about either attracting more of that market, or figuring out how to drive deeper engagement with those prospective customers that are already on your radar.
Totally. It's very hard to ask. This is why we hate giving just blanket test ideas, right? It's hard to say, do this, do that, because everyone's context is so different. So we always try to couch it in understanding your own data and understanding your opportunities and your resources that you have to feasibly get something done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So real quick, can we refresh people on what tools we're using to identify anonymous users? There's different softwares out there to do this. Optimizely uses Demandbase. You mentioned a few others.
Yeah, so there are several. So Demandbase is one of them. At FunnelEnvy, we have a platform that does too, based on reverse IP and cookie data. There are other solutions, I believe, with a lot of the marketing automation vendors, Marketo and HubSpot, bring some of that data to bear about anonymous traffic at various levels of quality. Triblio is another solution out there, I believe, that does the same.
Thank you. That will be, I bet these people will be getting more and more popular as personalization takes off. Yes. Well, I think we've got through all these questions. These were doozies. Good job, Arun. It's hard to be on the spot like this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone so much. We'll give you back 7 minutes of your day. Thank you for joining us and for being part of the Spring into Action webinar series. We have 3 more coming up for the travel industry, the media industry, and then Chris Goward from Wider Funnel, who Arun just mentioned, is going to be closing things out with a way to do all sorts of A/B testing prioritization for all industries. So hope you catch that. Check it out on our website. And again, thanks for being with us. We'll send out the recording and slides as soon as possible. Have a fantastic day. Arun, do you want to say bye?
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.